because if you tell someone, oh, take this wonderful tool, which is really easy, but after you build it, you also have to live with it, and when it breaks, you have to deal with it all the time. They will say, nope, thank you, I opt out.
The dream of visual programming has been there for forever. We're getting there because we see that in schools, we see that from early ages of children. And when they come to like real workforce, they will be able to use that knowledge, regardless of whether they are developers or not. They will be able to use that knowledge to visualize business processes.
You say environments in general, most people's eyes just glaze over. And I don't blame them because it's such an abstract concept.
I think that part that comes after onboarding, after the first impression, that is covered very badly by all the tools that I've been working with.
Welcome to Plan 8. I'm Andre.
And I'm Ala. And together we unpack the challenges we're busy solving as technology and leadership consultants. Hi, Andre. It's really nice to be back recording with you again. How have you been?
Yeah, I'm good. Hey, busy as always. How are you?
I've been dying to talk to you about building integrations. A few reasons to this. So first of all, I'm working with a client who wants to connect what we're building for them now with their existing internal systems. And had it not been for that integration and the problems that arise with it, we would have been finished weeks ago. Second, something came across on my feed. GCP's automation integration, now with Gemini on top. It's kind of a low-code solution, but now with AI plugged in as well. So that looked interesting, and I wanted to hear your thoughts. And third, a former colleague was sharing his experience about using Nation to integrate what he's building now with a standard Shopify instance. So I wanted to talk to you about what can the primary audience for the low-code solutions like PowerAutomate, like automation integration, Zapier, and many others, what can they learn from the experience of people who have coded integrations for higher stakes, more complex systems? Since you've been busy, I know you're integrating something as well. How does low-code fit into that world, and what's your experience with it?
I'm using low-code, no-code environments myself quite a lot, actually, because I always, as a developer, as an engineer, I have to wait what is taking more time and what's taking me faster to the solution, the coding part or the clicking and dragging, dropping, and connecting, all that stuff. And sometimes low-code environments actually win. And recently I had to actually write a few integrations in PowerAutomate because writing them in code would take me probably a week. Writing them, and at least the first version, creating them in the PowerAutomate is taking maybe half a day. Of course, some other things come up later, but the first version definitely was set up like way faster than I would code it. And I think that's what's driving many people that are non-technical or less technical or who are busy like us to implement something using PowerAutomate, Google integrations, maybe some other tools like Zapier, Make, IFTTT, because they have very low learning curve and very fast time to market or integration to market, so to say. And it gives you the value that you need fast. But of course, you and me, we know that after that thing works for maybe a couple of weeks, it usually breaks, or okay, maybe not usually, but sometimes it breaks, and then someone has to fix that. That's one thing that happens all the time. Another thing that happens all the time is that you realize that the complexity that you actually need is not supported by the tool of your choice, and then creating that in the low-code, no-code environment will actually take you more time or be very inconvenient, very clumsy compared to if you write it in the code. So yeah, that's kind of always a trade-off that you as a person who decides what to use, what to choose, have to make. Give you fast time to market, or fast time to implementation, or handle the troubles of integrations after that. Mm-hmm. That's always a trade-off.
I think it's like a hidden build versus buy. So people think, oh, it's just a small tool, it's going to make me move faster, but really it's just a small buy, and then you're buying a bit more, and then you realize it's not flexible enough, and you're actually better off building it. So there's a break point where you have to decide, right, the out of the box, this is an out of the box solution, but a very small and targeted one. There's a breakpoint where you have to decide, out of the box doesn't work anymore. I have to build my own, which fully suits my needs.
Well, usually when I feel that, the complexity of the flow is becoming unmanageable, then obviously it's probably the time, or maybe it's already late, but it's a good point where you have to switch to actually codifying that. Especially, these low-code environments, no-code environments, they are not targeted at debugging. They're not targeted at creating some sort of overview of what's happening, and usually they don't have any test environments where you actually can verify that things are working in the way they should work. And of course, when you have to deal with the complexity of the actual business workflow, then staying in the low-code, no-code environment is actually becoming more expensive. And then at that point, of course, you have to actually jump into something simpler, from technical perspective, because code in that case will be simpler than all the bits and pieces of the local environments. Because it's funny because usually these products like Make or Zapier or Integrately or something similar, they are created by developers. So those guys should give at least some things to more technical people to kind of have some debugging facilities or some maybe fall back to simple codification types of steps that you can put into workflows. But the funny thing, those environments don't have them. It's just not part of the product. I mean, maybe developers and general technical people are not the target audience, that's understandable. But when you're creating a codification product or like logical, or a product that contains some logic in the workflows, you probably have to think about some utilities that could help, more technical people to codify that, to maybe make it better, to maybe fall back to complex logic in the code rather than trying to go around the steps, the integrations that have been implemented in the workflow system. So yeah, it's with the more complex it gets, the harder it is to kind of get what you want from those kind of products usually.
I don't know if you've worked with Shopify a lot before. They have Flow. I'm pretty sure it used to be only available for the enterprise plan, which is like $2,000 a month. Now they made it available for everyone. But the main thing is they extended the building blocks so that you can use liquid code, which is funny, but you can use liquid code, which is effectively like a front end mix of PHP, Ruby on Rails, and Shopify's variables. You can use it in the automation flow. So you can build fairly complex things, and I have. But when I'm doing it, it always scares me that, okay, I've built it. I even documented it. So anything I built with flows, I document to the T. So effectively, there's no code, but there's the logic in the flow, and there's the documentation, which explains exactly how, why it's built, and how to debug it actually. But they've allowed inserting code into that flow, and I think it's a blessing and a curse because it makes things more dangerous, although it goes around some of the inflexibilities. So that's pretty cool. I think with developers, the thing is, when they build these drag and drop automation tools, for them the steps are pretty easy. So when something goes wrong, because these are small components, they can usually tell, oh, okay, this failed. It looks like this. It's probably something with authentication, or this is probably just wrong data format. Because for them, it's very common, so they can guess it with very high probability. But then your non-technical users, they've never encountered such problems. It doesn't work. What do I do? What do you think people without experience in software development engineering can learn from people with experience in terms of approach, but in a less technical language, to be more empowered to both build, but also diagnose and debug the integrations?
Usually what non-technical people want to achieve, they want to achieve the result fast. And most of the products that exist out there actually give them that result. What non-technical people don't take into account is that you have to maintain that logic, that workflow after some time. And that, of course, doesn't come immediately. That may come after a month, after a week, after a year, that what definitely non-technical people can get from technical people is that any system requires maintenance. Any system requires some infrastructure. Any system requires maybe some money that you have to pay for that system every month. Of course, when developers, at least from my experience, starting looking at this kind of workflow system, logical system, the first things come into mind. How do we set up more than one environment? How can we test that our workflow is actually working? How can we actually make a conclusion that what we did actually works in different edge cases? Because that's what many people don't think about edge cases. And how can we actually prove that whatever is coming through that workflow is going to work? And if there's an error, that's another thing that non-technical people usually don't consider. If there's an error, what do we do? What do we do then? Do we notify someone? Do we do some fallback? Do we do something differently? And of course, in simple cases, you would just have one full, like, couple of steps in the workflow. In more complex cases, you would have complex logic plus error handling, plus any exception logic that does handle unusual things, and edge cases and all that stuff. So eventually, something that seemed simple in the beginning would turn into something that is very, very complex. And that's what probably non-technical people should kind of learn from technical people, is that we need to, handle complexity, and we need to handle that a bit earlier rather than later, because when the flow that was built by someone who is non-technical is working, and it's actually part of the business flow and part of the money flow, you cannot really take it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have no option to kind of go and experiment with that and do some exception handling, because it's a live flow. It's working. It's in production right away, and that's what many non-technical people don't consider in the beginning.
It's such a sensitive topic, I think, because these flows are really built to empower business stakeholders, and we do want to encourage them to self-serve, because then they don't have to rely on the limited technical workforce, right? So working in banking, we used to encourage everyone in risk, in operations, in marketing and HR to use PowerAutomate. In that case, we were in a Microsoft shop to automate some of their business flows. The problem was they got scared of what if something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And in the end, when something did go wrong, they went to a specialized technical team who knew PowerAutomate inside and out. And they were building their own more complex integrations, but they could help debug as well. And this kind of defies the purpose, because then they're not self-reliant. So you want people using low code to not only be able to build it, but also to maintain it. So you have to adopt the you build it, you run it ethos, but at the same time, you kind of don't want to scare them away from this, because if you tell someone, oh, take this wonderful tool, which is really easy, but after you build it, you also have to live with it, and when it breaks, you have to deal with it all the time. They will say, nope, thank you, I opt out, I'm just going to rely on my technical team.
Yeah, because originally those products are built for people with non-technical background. But unless you use them for very simple cases, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. I have similar examples in the past where the architect on the project where I was, he had a brilliant idea that defining decision trees in Excel would be a very efficient way of giving that thing to business people. And business people could review the decision table, the decision tree, and then submit their new variant.
I'm sorry, what? How does that work?
It didn't work because eventually developers were responsible for changing the Excel sheets that were fit into the workflow engine and was actually executing the rule engine. Sorry, the rule engine was getting the Excel sheet with the decision table and was making the decisions for giving the loan, not giving the loan. And the original assumption was that Excel is good enough for business people, and business people actually handle the complexity of decision making inside the Excel sheet. But they didn't. So they basically delegated the whole thing to developers, and developers had to leave with the Excel sheet, which was stored in Git, and the code that was actually executing the decision table. In many cases, when the complexity hits, then obviously business people usually stay away from that because it's not their type of work that they try to do.
Right now, everyone is being pushed to upskill, right? So most companies demand that everyone is data proficient, so knows how to do some basic data analysis, understands statistics to a certain extent. People are definitely asked to understand prompting and how to use AI agents. And I think this should become the norm, but how can we ease people into that type of work and stop them from saying, this is not for me, this is above my pay grade, or this is about my knowledge level? Because in reality, if you explain well that the automation that you have to maintain, which is a burden on you, had there been no automation, you would have been doing this manually and dealing with all the same problems but by hand, or you would have had to wait on availability from technical teams and fight other stakeholders for their time and priorities in order to get your thing built. So you're already in a better position. If you upskill yourself, put in a little bit more effort, you'll be in a far better position. So maybe if we just teach them some of the skills that we use day to day, in code and in low code, in any type of engineering, but in a simpler, less intimidating format, more people would adopt these tools, because that could be a huge productivity boost, especially now that larger technical platforms incorporate your natural language into the process. So you don't even have to drag drops which say, this is a condition, this is an action, this is something else, which in itself already looks like a circuit. So many people will find it off-putting. Where if you say something, when I get a comment on Instagram, send this to this Slack channel, or when I receive a form submission into the CRM, send it by email here, here, and here, and set the status of it to approval needed. What could we teach business people about how to build systems now that they're empowered to build systems, and also about how to run systems? I can give you an example. Understanding uptime of whatever they integrate with on a basic level helps. So for example, a marketing person comes in and says, oh, I had this automation, but I think it doesn't work because I have some things which were not sent through. And if you explain to them that they actually were sent through, so your automation tried to send them through, you had a CRM submission, and then you tried to post something on Instagram or on Facebook, but it didn't go through because the Instagram API, well, you can't say API if you're speaking to them. You say Instagram was unavailable at that point, like Instagram was down. If you were doing this by hand, it would have been down as well. So what do? You take that submission, you wait until Instagram is up, and then you post it manually. And you're effectively teaching replay and retry in a human-friendly way.
Returning to the topic of should we teach them something, or maybe make our explanations more human to them. If we talk about teaching, then I think we actually trying that all the time, at least in my bubble, to kind of show what kind of things you can do with Excel. So not just plain table, but you can also do pivots and charts and all that stuff, and summarization, all that stuff. So working with data is essentially is important part of anyone's job, and like in knowledge domain. The level of knowledge of people working in technical organizations and IT-based organizations is definitely raising with years. So people know Excel, people know how to work with data. But as you mentioned, I think that they're afraid if something goes wrong, and also they're afraid if something that looks like a black box, like Instagram, which you don't know when it fails, when you don't want the connection between your client or low-code environment client and Instagram, the connection will break. You don't know when it happens. That's one thing. So of course they are afraid of that. But you made the right point that if we explain that to them in more non-technical terms and kind of explain them how to work around things when certain things are not working, because they will not work at some point, that may shift, the culture of how they look at that. Because of course, when something doesn't work and they don't understand why it doesn't work, obviously they feel helpless. And I mean, it's not only like non-technical people; it's in general. If I don't understand how something works, and I don't know what to do about that, I'm helpless. I cannot do anything. I have to wait for some other technical person out there to help me out with that. So obviously, if we have this culture that could help us foster the notion of breakability of things, so that things do break, and that there are some workarounds that can help you to do it manually sometimes, then yeah, it would explain a lot of things, and would probably build the culture of people working and being less afraid of technical solutions. Because yeah, I think that's the goal of these low code, no code environments. Yeah, they have to, at least on the surface, seem like they're easy to work with. Since I've been working with many of them, like PowerAutomate and Integrately and Make and Zapier, and I think the biggest problem is that it's hard to see what the problem is, and the tool quite often, if there's a problem, doesn't suggest for you what to do. I mean, if connection is between Instagram and Zapier, for example, is not working, usually it does give you an advice. You have to go and reconnect, right? You get an email that the connection is broken, you have to press the button, you have to go to reconnect. But if the data has changed, or API has changed, or some fields in the API or in the response from Instagram, for example, are missing, and they're missing because of different post type that you get there, and your logic was expecting that field, then usually those tools are not really friendly in that regard. They don't say to you that, okay, there's some that this field actually is not supposed to be here, but it's supposed to be here, but it's not here. So you actually should add a case that will handle this kind of situation. You have to handle add each statement and all that stuff. And of course, this is complexity. And for anyone who is not familiar with any kind of logical programming, they'll feel scared. And of course, the tools have to kind of give them an option. Okay, do you want me to implement that for you now? And especially with LLMs and tools that can be knowledgeable about the environment, can help you out much faster with that. And that's about how good is your product for the target audience. If Zapier or Integrately is only covering the onboarding part or the first impression part, but never covering the later part as a product, then of course eventually developers will hate it, because they have to basically rewrite the same thing in code after that, and business people will hate it because they have to understand why it's failing, and either they do it by themselves and maybe lose a lot of time, or they hire technical people to help them out with that. So I think that part that comes after onboarding, after the first impression, that is covered very badly by all the tools that I've been working with. And if we kind of, if tool creators, they will actually make it better, then we have more chances to have it more becoming essential part of any business process and any technical, non-technical kind of integrations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Really, it's not technical employees who should be training their business counterparts. It's the tool that should be training business users. So ideally, you would have a very clear explanation of what the error was, so people are not scared, so people keep their trust in the tool, and then you have some suggested steps, but it needs to be part of the product. So these low-code environments need to be almost like a non-technical platform, less than just a tool, and it needs to adhere to all the regular rules of good platform engineering. You mentioned things that give you anxiety because you don't understand them. For me, one of them is webhooks. So although they are helpful for the happy path and best effort scenarios where you want to be informed if possible, I find them quite scary because they appear as a promise that you will always get the information back when something happens, where really they're quite an unreliable mechanism. There is usually a setting somewhere in low-code environments on how many retries you get, or what happens if you get this response, that response. But that already takes the tool out of the user-friendly zone and more into the developer zone. So you have to understand the fact that systems break, that operations fail. You have to understand retry mechanism. You have to understand exponential backoff. You have to understand error handling. You have to understand that the system that you are sending the webhook to might not send the right responses. So for example, you have handled a 500 or 400 response, but actually the system you're integrating with always sends a 200, and then any errors go into the payload. And in order to handle that, you have to be an experienced developer. So I found webhooks to not be super reliable. They're great when they work because they're very quick to set up, but there's rarely any reliable authentication. So it's not super secure. And then when they don't work, there's very little that you can do with it, and people end up disappointed that they've lost some information. So what I try to do when possible is to flip the integration around, and instead of the source system sending a webhook, the integration mechanism polls the source system for any updates, and then when there are unprocessed updates, it sends them to the target system. So that's one of the approaches I use. Do you have any tricks up your sleeve when it comes to this?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's basically the same thing. If I know about unreliability of some system, then I would create some sort of buffer or queue or something like that, or retry mechanism. But imagine, getting back to non-technical people, imagine explaining that to non-technical people of why something doesn't work. And then, of course, some tools like, for example, Zapier and Integrately and PowerAutomate, they have different level of connections that they support for different products. So some of the products they integrate with are like second-level citizens, where you have to use API or a webhook that is provided. Some types of connections are actually like first-grade citizens, where there is some streaming channel between the systems, where the actually retry is built in, where the state of the other system you integrate with, and that is definitely more reliable. So, for example, if you're talking about PowerAutomate, definitely working with Microsoft products is more reliable in PowerAutomate than in any other type of system like Zapier, for example. And that's not the challenge, actually, because in one of the companies where we're helping, I actually had to use several workflow tools, low-code tools, because of that factor. Because some of the instruments, they don't support certain types of connections or support that in a mechanism that is not reliable. And I had to use another mechanism, another workflow engine, another workflow environment to have this reliability factor. And that's another annoying thing about this, that you have to choose the product, and it's not going to be one product. It's probably going to be several products. Mm-hmm. And then maintainability comes into play, and you have to maintain all of the different workflows with different glitches and quirks and all that stuff, which is not fun.
Yeah, and you've also mentioned that very rarely there are environments that you can use for testing or development, so you have to solve that. I've seen companies SaaS products build out extensive environment mechanisms. The problem is that I'm yet to meet a non-developer who doesn't get confused by them. So you say environments in general, most people's eyes just glaze over. And I don't blame them, because it's such an abstract concept. It's like so intangible. It's inherent to what we do. So for example, Contentful, the content management system, has environments, and everyone I know who does content or is a non-technical stakeholder hates them, because they exist, and then you are stuck with maintaining environments, and you have to explain why data is not synced automatically between development and production. And it seems obvious to you, but to everyone else, it's not really obvious, because they did something in a test environment and they think, oh, okay, now I want to promote it to prod. But it's not a very straightforward workflow. And then there are tools which have a development mode. So you are in development until a certain point, and then you say, and now we go live, and now you have a live product. Well, the challenge is, if you want to develop something on top of the first iteration, which you do in 99.5009% of the time, you have to do this in production. This is something that's not solved, and I don't think it's going to be solved, and I don't think that the goal is should be to solve it.
Just imagine if you have an Instagram account you want to integrate with, you will not have a test Instagram account to test it first. You only have production Instagram account, and that's the only way you can test things. So certain types of systems definitely be always like in a singular amount, and unfortunately that's the way it is. But your example with Contentful, I think that's something that requires explanation, right? So you have to explain to non-technical people why we do that, and because the process is not straightforward. Actually, maybe in some cases it could be automatic, because if you have some guardrails that verify the content in some way, or you get some approval system that the reviewers, the editors approve the content, then of course it can be published into production like in no time. But the lack of approval system, or the lack of clear understanding why we cannot deploy new content to new production website, if people don't understand the why, then of course they will be frustrated. So it's more like a question, or a task to the leadership, to the management, to have the clear explanation of why we do certain things in the way we do them. Maybe because there was an incident few years back where company lost a lot of money or lost reputation because they published test content with some naked people. I don't know.
This brings me to the thought that maybe we shouldn't be calling non-technical people. So there are people, it's a spectrum, and to a certain extent everyone has to use technology. Like, you cannot avoid it. The final aspect of low-code integrations I wanted to bring to you was secret management. Even if you are less technical, not specialized in tech, you have to learn some practices of good secret management. For example, secret rotation, sharing versus non-sharing.
There's actually two aspects to that, because many of these tools, they do support OAuth authentication for like different connections. But the problem with OAuth is that it is attached to a specific person, right? So whoever is setting up the, let's say, Instagram integration or Teams integration is using their own authentication credentials, sort of, to authenticate the workflow, and then the token is being kind of given to the background workflow process inside this Make or Integrately or Zapier, and that token may expire, and then that person or the other person have to go into the workflow and refresh the connection. The problem with that is, if a person who did the setup, if he leaves the company, his token is still there and still being used to kind of authenticate against the production account. And let's say if someone if administrative personnel is removing him from the Instagram account, of course the integration will break. So managing who is actually setting up the accounts and who is authenticating the flows to have the secure connection between the services is another challenge that companies have to do. I mean, OAuth is secure, no doubt about that. But the challenge of people leaving and coming into the company, that could become a problem in the future. But as you mentioned, the other problem is that some services do not support OAuth, or you probably don't want to use OAuth for some reason, and you have to have your secrets. For example, with the same in Instagram, you can actually, in some services, you can just provide a password, and it will kind of integrate that behind the scenes. And of course, how do you manage the password then? Should it be just hard-coded in the flow? Then pretty much anyone who is setting up the flow can go and see the password. And unfortunately, many of these tools, they support secret management in a very simplistic way. So you're hard-coding that, or using OAuth, or you have to use some external secret manager, which is, for people who are not specializing in secret management, is actually quite hard to understand, especially if you give them an interface of, I don't know, something like Google Secret Manager or Azure Secret Manager or Amazon Secret Manager. Those things are not easy to understand and not easy to use, and you have to handle another permission set to give those kind of access to those secret managers. If you take something like Bitwarden or 1Password, they also have integrations. Maybe a bit simpler than, let's say, Amazon secret manager, but again, they are usually on a higher level of needs more cognitive energy to understand for people who never used them before. So yeah, it's a challenge. And of course, when we give access to something like our company's main Instagram account or our company's shared inbox where we're getting invoices, that could become a bit of a security nightmare in the future if you don't manage it correctly. I'm trying to solve it because the flows that I have set up for my company, I am the creator and I am the technical person, so I can handle that. But I cannot imagine giving that to anyone who is less technical than me.
It's quite difficult. So as a fractional CTO and even as a consultant in my previous roles, I've had to set certain things up and then I've had to extract myself from the flow. Yeah. But it was frustrating. It was a lot of clicking and documenting and explaining, but I knew what I was doing because I was building it with the thought of extracting myself from the very beginning. So I knew I was only there part-time. Most people don't even know this is a problem. I'll give you an example. I have a client who couldn't find whose Google account is connected to their YouTube account. So we were praying that the person whose account is connected is still with the company and they wouldn't have to call ex-employees and say, hey, remember setting up a YouTube account for us 15 years ago?
The DNS providers as well, when people leave, and it appears that they are the ones who have set up the DNS names.
Yes, and oftentimes people don't think it's necessary to document these things because it's very easy to do in the beginning. So the process of setting up is 5 minutes, but there are many manual steps, so no one documents them. Then they're very reliable, so they don't break for years, so no one has the need to do anything. And then the other one is many integration clients work with Instagram directly, and Instagram has no concept of roles or organizations. So I know for a fact that all marketing teams share passwords. Well done, Meta. Such great design. So they all share passwords, and then they either get hacked all the time, which is a common problem, or they have to have a 2FA mechanism, which is really difficult to manage between team members. So I've had an Instagram account on my phone number in a team which was distributed between Eastern Europe and West Coast in the US. That was fantastic when you get messaged at 11 p.m. saying, hey, pretty please, can you give me a code? We worked around that. But at the same time, they recommend, so Meta recommends that you use Facebook for Business, where you have the suite of all the marketing tools with really bad UX. Yeah, with really bad UX and really bad documentation and really bad support. But it does tie everything together. And you're supposed to integrate through that because it does have roles, it does have onboarding, offboarding, so all of the things that mature companies want to offer because they understand that people leave. But the integrations don't work with that. They work with Instagram directly. So these problems surface.
The creator tools are not working correctly there because they had Creator Studio. I think they deprecated that. Whatever they created in replacement is. So basically, if you talk to any SMM, please use Facebook Business Manager, Meta Creator Suite, whatever. They refuse to do it because it's not useful. So yeah, security is becoming better in Meta, but the usability of creative tools is not, unfortunately. So the best thing to actually create something for Instagram is still mobile application.
Mm-hmm. What are we saying? We should be educating people on how to build systems. So we should make everyone a little bit of an engineer, not a full-blown engineering specialist, but a little bit of an engineer. We should improve interfaces, both for users and for developers, so integrations break less. And we definitely have to think about usability of integration platforms beyond the happy path, beyond the onboarding journey.
That would definitely improve the adoption of these tools and survivability of those tools. Because, I mean, probably you've seen that as well, that after some time, after some level of complexity, people abandon the tools because it's just too much cognitive energy spent on understanding what is going wrong, and they fall back to manual stuff, or they delegate that to developers and more technically specialized people. So I mean, I think it's still a problem of a products that we have in the market at the moment. They are really not handling anything apart from happy path. I mean, just PowerAutomate. I used it last week, and of course they have Copilot inside. And of course, I wanted to ask something that I wanted to understand, and that guy didn't even guess the context. I mean, it even generated some piece of expression that and even that was wrong. So what kind of usability we're talking about here?
Let me help, says something completely unhelpful.
So these tools are definitely useful because they save time in the beginning. We just need to make the second step and make them useful in the maintenance security domains as well.
So we need to implement quality engineering and quality usability beyond coding tools and fulfill the promise of these tools. I would love to see more people building systems. I enjoy building systems very much, but for me it's much easier to build them with code, because then I'm in full control and I'm using all of my advanced tools and I'm using my existing approaches. But I think people can have a lot of fun at work building their own systems. It's just so inspiring. I had an agile delivery manager, hi Simon, who was literally the best automator probably in all of tech. Although he didn't write any code, he just found every single little inefficiency or room for improvement, and then found a way to get rid of that with low-code tools, or with an improved process, or with improved statuses in the tracking tool. It was fantastic.
But nothing is impossible for curious mind. If especially now when information is available, knowledge is available, you can search and ask ChatGPT and all that stuff. It's really about the passion, as you said, for that person, that they want to, with their curiosity, find the path to a better solution, and then of course it will just be done eventually. Another thing that I think is quite cool, in schools I see students that are learning Scratch, this visual programming interface, which I think is very good, because the dream of visual programming has been there for forever. People were dreaming about doing something with just visual representation of logic, and I think we were getting there, because we see that in schools. We see that from early ages for children, and when they come to real workforce, they will be able to use that knowledge, regardless of whether they are developers or not. They will be able to use that knowledge to visualize business processes and actually make them work right there in the designer. And we just need better designers. I mean, better designer UIs, so to say.
Mm-hmm. My children actually did Scratch at school. They really liked it. And they got really good at this, but they had the same challenges that we discussed before, where they understood how to build the basic logic and flows, but they didn't understand all of the basic plumbing, like authentication, token expiry, identity. When things fail, what do you do when it's more than just retrying? And that is something that maybe we could make simpler for the user.
What I like about Scratch is that you can actually do parallel programming there. You can actually have several threads. And I mean, that's another thing that what usually happens in business processes, right? It's not one flow, actually many flows, and some of them can happen in the same time. Then what happens when they happen at the same time and have concurrency condition? Well, that's interesting. We have to kind of expect that it can happen and explain it also to people who are using those.
That's a great idea. I think we should do another session with not live coding, but live clicking, where we integrate something with something and highlight maybe with more specialized eyes where we can see failure points and how to deal with them. What do you think about that?
Yeah, we should. Maybe we also should invite someone, some business person who wants to build something, and we build something together, and then get their impression about how easy it was.
That's a really cool idea. I know what we're doing next week or the week after that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Andrei. Pleasure as always.
Yeah, pleasure is mine. Please cut it out.
So they just think, oh, doesn't work. What do I do?